Today I'm adding Outzone from the Tower Plan Arcade Collection 3 to my ever-growing list where I rank every Evercade game ever. Originally released in 1990 and quite obviously developed by Tower Plan, Outzone is, I believe, or was rather, Tower Plan's first top-down multi-directional shoot-'em-up, but one that definitely fuses a bit of a more typical vertically scrolling shoot-'em-up style to it, in typical Tower Plan fashion.
Story.
It's an arcade-based shoot-'em-up. It doesn't need much of a story, but basically you control some cybernetic mercenary hired to stop an alien invasion. Yeah, that's pretty much it, and that's all it needs, so yeah, moving on.
Graphics.
I think Outzone is a really good looking game, some excellent sprite work. It's very sort of early 90s sort of tough action hero cybernetic type stuff, whether it's industrial corridors, alien landscapes, the enemies have that kind of sci-fi action movie style. Whether it's the weapon effects, the enemy sprites, your character, or the environments, I think everything is really high quality and it's suitably dark and moody.
Sound and music.
The sound effects are all decent, they've got a suitable impact to them that hit when the game needs them to hit. The soundtrack is high energy, punchy and very early 90s arcade. While it may not quite hit the heights of some of Tower Plan's classic soundtracks, it certainly isn't far off it. So yeah, the sound and music hits exactly as it needs to, so yeah, really good stuff.
Gameplay.
As I mentioned earlier, it is sort of a fusion of a top-down run-and gun and a vertically scrolling shoot-'em-up. You start off with your multi-directional shooting. You can pick up power-ups and special weapons, but every so often you'll come across an icon with a C on it, and this will change you from multi-directional shooting to another weapon that is a fixed shooting up the screen vertically scrolling shoot-'em-up style type weapon. It also has an energy bar which is always depleting, meaning you have to pick up the E icon pickup things to keep that topped up, effectively always pushing you forward. In many ways, despite the top-down run and gun aspect of it, it still very much plays like a typical vertically scrolling shoot-'em-up. The enemy waves and patterns are really well balanced. It's tough and fair, although the game does seem extremely tough at first, or at least I found it tough at first, to the point where I was dying horribly and almost got frustrated with it. But once the gameplay clicked for me, I found myself quickly making some good progress. It really is a game that demands sort of replaying and learning, because that's where you really see how the gameplay shines. So overall, it's another great shoot-'em-up from Tower Plan. Normally I would add my ranking here, but it makes sense to also cover Fixeight in this video, as they are very similar games. Fixeight was launched in 1992 and is the spiritual successor to Outzone. It keeps the same format, the red run and gun that plays a bit more like a vertically scrolling shoot-'em-up, but this time you have more characters, 8 in fact. But I'll come back to that later. Let's start off with the story. It's set in some future where there's an alien race known as the Gozu from the planet Fortuna, and they're invading the universe. And you play as one of 8 mercenaries hired to fight the bad guys. Yep, that's about it. But that's all it needs.
Graphics.
This is where Fixeight differentiates from Outzone the most, well, aside from the multiple playable characters I suppose. Although you still have good quality sprite works, everything's a bit more flamboyant and brighter coloured, giving a more comic book or Saturday morning cartoon feel than Outzone had. Everything does look good, but I've got to admit I much prefer the stylings of Outzone over Fixeight. Again, that's personal preference at the end of the day.
Sound and music.
The sound effects are similarly good quality, there's no subtlety to it, it's loud explosions and bangs and they all do the job admirably. The soundtrack, however, I don't think holds a candle to Outzone's. It's perfectly fine, maybe leaning to a bit more dramatic rather than energetic, but I wouldn't call it even close to one of Tower Plan's best. It's fine, it does the job and it has I suppose a fairly distinct feel, it's just not amazing.
Gameplay.
The core gameplay loop is pretty much identical to Outzone, the switching of your weapon types and so on. However, the energy draining thing is gone, so it doesn't have that push forward mechanic. Of course, where it does mix things up is the different playable characters, as they all have their own unique weapons and power-up types. It also feels generally a bit more aggressive with more enemies on screen. Essentially, it's a bigger, louder, more chaotic sequel, or spiritual successor, and having different playable characters certainly adds something. But I feel overall it loses more than it gains. The gameplay isn't as tight or as exciting. I'd say the music and graphics aren't as good in my opinion. It's still a fun game and arguably better in multiplayer than Outzone is, but either way it's still a very good game.
Overall opinion.
As you can no doubt tell, I prefer Outzone to Fixeight. In my view, Fixeight is a big dumb sequel that loses some of the charm of the original. It is fun and frantic and completely entertaining, so it's well worth a play. And I would also say it's an easier playthrough than Outzone, mostly due to where you respawn when you continue.
Ranking.
So placing these games on my ever-growing list where I rank every Evercade game ever, I've elected to put Outzone above King of the Fighters 97 but below Mega Turrican, and I've elected to put Fixeight above Cadaver but below Worms the Director's Cut, putting Outzone at number 25 on my list and Fixeight at number 59, and that's out of 401 games that I've ranked so far. Yeah, I generally like these games, perhaps more than most people do. Anyway, I think that's enough for today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.